Hey guys, today we are going to learn how to properly decorate a cake, and we'll learn that by learning how to make a filling from scratch and a buttercream from scratch, and then we'll just properly learn how to decorate and ice it fully using all of those ingredients. So let's get started. First of all, we'll go through the supplies that we need. So I've got my medium bowls, I've got a saucepan and various spatulas and a whisk, and we've got all of the measuring cups, and we've got our cake board and our cake turntable, and as well as a bread knife and various spatulas that we need for decorating. I've got the bench scraper and some flat spatulas. We need a decorating bag and a couple tips. My choice for decorating them is an 808 and a 1M. That's what I'll be using today. And then we need duct tape and a mixer and a paddle attachment. Alright, so the first thing we'll be making is ganache. And what you need for that is 8 ounces of chocolate chips in a medium-sized bowl, and a spatula and a whisk. And you'll need 3/4 of heavy cream, and you'll pour that into the saucepan and cook that on very low heat. And that's just to ensure that it won't bubble over, because you've got to be really careful with milk. Once it starts heating up, it's going to start overflowing very quickly. So one of your partners has to be with the heated milk at all times, and the other one can be cleaning up and helping others with some dishes. But I've got it cooking right now, and so we'll wait. And once we have little bubbles forming around the corners, so it's not going to be fully boiling, just little bubbles around the corners, we will take that off heat immediately, and we will put it in the chocolate chips and just let it sit for a couple seconds, and then we'll slowly whisk it together, and then that's it. Alright, so we've got the heavy cream heated until it was just lightly bubbling, so we are going to pour it straight onto the 8 ounces of chocolate chips, and we're going to just clear out the whole thing with a spatula, and we're just going to let it sit. Ganache. It is literally just heavy cream and chocolate mixed together. You just have to make sure that you go slowly so that the hot and cold are not mixed too quickly and it'll separate. So this is the consistency that you're looking for, and it'll be pretty soupy at first, but that's why we're going to let it cool so that it'll thicken up a little, so it'll be efficient enough for our filling. And then you can always heat it up if you want to top it on the top of your cake. Or sometimes you see ganache coverings on certain things, and so that's always it just heated up so that it becomes a smoother, more liquid consistency. So we'll just put this off to the side and we'll begin on our buttercream. Alright guys, so now we're going to make our buttercream, and I've chosen to make a chocolate buttercream with my chocolate cake and chocolate ganache. So first of all, the ingredients that we need is a cup of softened butter in the microwave. I did it for about 10 seconds. And then 6 tablespoons of cocoa powder, and a cup of milk, and then 8 cups of powdered sugar, or thereabout depending on the consistency, and then 2 teaspoons of vanilla. And then obviously our mixer, and then our paddle attachment. So to get started, we'll just throw the butter in first, and so you might need a spatula. And it shouldn't be running out, it should just be slightly soft, just so that it won't be bricks in the mixer. Alright guys, so I creamed the butter, and this is what it should look like. Just a cream mixture, but not liquidy or too soft, just enough to mix it all together and for it to be a good consistency. But the reason you mix the butter together before is so that it is more of a cream consistency, and if you just kind of throw all of it together at the same time, there's going to be lumps of butter in there and it's not going to fully support all the other ingredients. So after you've kind of mixed all the ingredients together on very low speed, you always start off with just a basic mix, or else if you start it on really high, then the powdered sugar is going to go absolutely everywhere. And so please, for you and your partner's sake, start it on a very low speed and then gradually go up. And then after a couple seconds of mixing together, you'll kind of be able to see the consistency. Mine's a little bit watery because I didn't add all of the powdered sugar in. So now I'm going to add a little bit more, and you just kind of juggle in between the powdered sugar and the milk. Add a little bit more of this. And then again, I will do it on low speed. Making mine a little bit of mess, but... it does have to go up to a higher speed in order to really fully incorporate and get that fluffiness into the frosting. So you do it on a lower speed until it's just roughly mixed together, and then you put it on higher. Alright, now I have got my buttercream to the consistency that I desire, just kind of how I was talking about how it actually sticks to the spatula. Obviously it might be falling a little because you don't want it like a brick, but it is completely sticking to the spatula, not like before where I held it up and it just kind of fell off. So you, that's how you can kind of check the consistency with it, and obviously taste it and make sure it's tasting just fine. Especially for decorating cakes, you'll want it pretty thick, because if it's just this loose buttercream, then it's just going to fall straight off your cake. Especially in the middle, if you're just using, you know, frosting on some instances, then that's not going to hold the two cakes together very well. So I will scoop this out, and then we'll move on to bringing our cakes out and putting our filling and our buttercream all together and bringing all of the decorating skills that we've learned into our beautiful cake. Alright, so now we've gotten all our ingredients together for making our cake. So we've got our ganache and our buttercream that we made earlier, and so the rest of the supplies that you need are duct tape and our bench scraper, as well as our spatulas, and then you need a bread knife. You know that it's a bread knife because of the crevices on it, and then our icing bag and the two tips that I prefer, and then obviously your cake board and your turntable so that you can decorate it. And then I have the cakes over here. So first of all, we're going to cut our cake, so I'm going to move this out of the way so I can have some space. And you're going to use your knife to even out the bread, the cake. Okay, so now we are going to even out the cake layers, because obviously you can see that these are not even. So to get the right levels, you can just roughly smooth your knife over the layers and put your hand on top of the cake so that you can hold it in place, the top layer. So I like pretty much the the height of this one, so I just mostly want to get this the same size as well as some of your cakes. If you didn't flip them over, you're gonna have more of a dome shape on your cakes, and so also you can use this as kind of cutting off the unevenness, because if it goes up like this, then that's what your cake's gonna look like. So we're gonna cut this off. I'm gonna start about here. Usually the cake actually has kind of like a line that it breaks out of the pan, so I usually go by that as a tracer. So you put your hand on top and you just guide it. You don't even really have to saw through it, you just push right on through. And so that was pretty much an even cut, but you can just kind of look at it and roughly even it out. And you'll just kind of throw this excess away. So that's pretty good. And then we'll measure that out to this one, and I honestly think that one's pretty good, but just for kicks, I'll even that one out as well. So both of these you can see are pretty even, and you've gotten our excess. And so this is sometimes what people use for cake pops. That's why it's become so popular, because bakers wanted to get more money out of just throwing away these top layers. So this is what people usually use, or they can use like bread pudding or something like that to make money out of kind of the leftover part of the cake that people cut off. But you can also just completely diminish that by turning the cake over. Once it comes out of the oven, you just turn the pan straight onto another pan and just let it cool flat, and then that'll create more of a flat top for us. But since these were so uneven, I needed to go ahead and do that. So you just throw this away, or you can use it as a little snack while you're decorating. So now we'll continue on to filling and icing the cake. Alright, so now that we've gotten everything ready to go, I'm finally going to use the duct tape. I know a lot of people are probably wondering, what in the world do you need this for? So I always use this as a little trick to attach my board to the turntable, because obviously you will have the weight of the cake, but it's moving around, so when you turn the turntable, you don't want your cake to go flying. So just use a little duct tape and stick it right on, and then put the cake board in the middle of the turntable, and use the glossy side so that you can scrape the icing off afterwards, and not the cardboard side, because then you're just going to stain it with the grease of the frosting in the cake, and that won't look very nice. So now that we've gotten this in place, we're going to take our first cake and put it on our board. But this as well has the same problem. If you put it on here and decorate it, it does have a tendency to slide around. So instead of just kind of chancing that, I kind of do the same technique and put a dollop of frosting on the board to just make sure that it stays in place. The same thing with the duct tape with the board. So to start off, I'm going to show you how to put frosting in the bag so that we can start decorating. So you put the tip in it, and I pretty much use the biggest round tip that I can find, and you put that inside, and so you'll already have this trimmed off so that this pokes out about halfway. And then I turn half of my bag inside out so that goes about halfway, and then my hand just grips underneath it like this so that it's completely supporting the weight of the bag, so that when I start putting my frosting in it, it won't just slide right off of my hand. So use a spatula and just scoop the frosting in there. So again, my hand is pretty much holding the frosting through the bag so that it will start sliding through if you put a whole lot in there, or it's going to start coming out the top. So just fill it up just halfway, and then you can always refill it again and do the same procedure. So I use both hands and just kind of scoop it up and completely turn it back right side out. And then you kind of just squeeze it down so that it starts coming out, and then I just kind of scrape off the top. So you just have to make sure you watch it though, because the frosting will start kind of coming out of the tip. So you just kind of gotta watch it. It's still in a bag and it's still gonna come out. So obviously if it was filled too much, it would start coming out of this top. So I put my hand on the top. So this is about where the icing ends. So I just grip my hand around here. And then I put my other hand here to make kind of like a circle, just to completely control the icing. So this part of my hand squeezes and holds so that the frosting, when I squeeze my other hand, won't start coming out that way. So this holds it from going forward, and then this hand keeps it from going out that way. So this is the hand that has the most control. So if you're right-handed or left-handed, this is your main dominant hand is the one that needs to be at this spot. So this will control, you know, the pressure. If I want it slow, I squeeze slow. And if I want it quick, then obviously I do it quicker, so then you can just kind of control it like that, especially when you're doing cupcakes and you want big and then small, you can just really control that. And then I just scrape it off the sides and just completely use this entire bowl when I'm frosting. So again, we will start with putting a little dollop on here, and then we will put our cake just right on top. So now that I've gotten the first cake layer on, glued with the frosting, you are then going to put the ganache in, and then you'll be able to put the top part of the cake. The way that you can tell which side is which is, I always picture it like a sandwich. So the insides that you've kind of cut that has more of an open, fresh cake to it, those I kind of call the insides. And so this side would obviously, with the flour, is going to be the outside. And so you always kind of want to make sure that both insides are touching. So that's kind of like a sandwich. So both of the insides will be contacting, and that'll just make sure that this is kind of the rounded top. And so this always needs to be inside, so that the greatest, smoothest part of the cake that is completely round, because it was on the bottom of the pan, will have the greatest consistency and look when it comes to frosting it on top. So it'll have the most even look again. So we will start with this, and then we're going to just pretty much scoop it on. So now you can tell that the ganache has thickened a lot more, and that's really what you want. You want it to almost be like frosting, where this pretty much supports the inside of the cake, because you don't want it flopping around. I like to just put a little circle of frosting around the inside of the cake. And it doesn't really matter if it's kind of fallen off, because pretty much this whole cake's going to be covered anyways. So you just scoop a little dollop of ganache. I want mine a little thicker, so just to really have that flavor of the ganache in there. But if you just want like a really thin, just hint of flavor, if you're doing something stronger, then you can just put a little thin layer, but you want the layer to be even. So this is going to maybe push out the frosting a little bit, but no big deal, because I'm making it happen like that. But this will just keep it all secure, so that when you're frosting the cake, you won't all of a sudden have ganache mixing in with the frosting. So I've gotten, I think this is a pretty thick layer, but I like it and I want to be able to taste the ganache. So that's kind of what it looks like. And so we'll just put this off to the side, and then we're going to put our top of the sandwich. So remember, inside and then the top, so that it is the smoothest. So now it looks a little rough right now, but this is really what it's supposed to look like. You just kind of lightly squish, don't completely smush it, because then all of the insides are just going to come pouring out. So mostly you just have to make sure that the top is even. It looks pretty good, just because if you have one side that's a little bit more frosting, then the top is going to be kind of lopsided, and then you'll have a lopsided cake. So just go ahead and make sure now if you're headed towards the lopsided phase. And I think mine looks pretty good. And so now we're just gonna completely frost the cake, and it's gonna look pretty rough at first, but just bear with me. What I've kind of learned when working at a bakery is just being efficient and just working really quickly. And so instead of, some people kind of teach like a crumb coat, to where you completely frost it really rough, and so that all the crumbs are then kind of incorporated into that, and then you do a whole nother layer. But now it's just kind of, you just do a really thick covering, and then just don't dig too deep into the cake, and then you'll be pretty good to go. So I'm going to start on the top. So you just do an even little circle, so that it's going to be pretty extra amount of frosting. So now I'm empty, so I'm gonna just turn it inside out again and dollop some more frosting in here. And you really are just gonna completely roughly cover this, and it looks pretty terrible, but it's gonna be a lot easier to smooth out completely. So using the turntable, you don't have to move all around the cake. You can just completely move around the side without having to move yourself, because your arm's going to get tired after a while. This is the only hard part with the frosting not coming out of the sides, so maybe start off with a smaller amount, just so that your frosting's not going to start pouring out. So you'll start here, and the frosting is going to fall off. All right. All right, and so now we've gotten our rough coat, and we're just going to leave this for a couple seconds, and you can put your bag and wash your bag out, and then we're going to smooth it out. But we'll just take this time to just clean up really quickly, and then start decorating it, so you can clean up your bag and everything. Spatula, and just kind of roughly spread that out. And not really trying to take any frosting off per se, but just making it slightly even, so that when you're bench scraping it, it'll just be a little easier. So now you're going to take your bench scraper, you're going to start on one end and completely scrape it. And this is probably going to be the hardest part, but it doesn't have to be perfect. Just make sure that it is completely even. It's not, you know, slightly to the side, because then your cake's going to have that siding. So you're going to make sure that you always keep it on the side of the board flat, and just make sure that it's straight. So you're just going to take it and just do a really, really rough scrape first. So pretty much you're going to just take it and scrape the frosting right off. And you are going to make a mess with the frosting at first, but it's so easy to get it off. But I mean, don't try and make a mess, but it's okay if it gets on there, because then you can just use a white rag and get it off. So you're going to do it again, and this time, since you've gotten a little bit of the rough edges kind of smoothed out, you know, it's not as rough looking, then you can start being a little bit more serious about your angle and the amount of frosting that you want off of the cake. So you're going to just completely stay at one part. See, sometimes I'm getting too much right here, just because I really put a heavy amount right there, so I'm just going to stop and then scrape a little bit more off, especially at the beginning. That's no big deal, because it's going to be all uneven everywhere. So now, you know, you can see we're getting somewhere. So probably going to do it just maybe one or two more times. But one thing that I like to do is, when you're about halfway through, then start decorating the top, because once you start messing with the top, frosting is going to start, you know, kind of coming down the sides, and then your perfect siding will then be messed up with the correcting the top. So you can kind of scrape off some of the top. And you know, obviously you can try and get it really perfect and smooth, but especially since this is more of a flavoring assignment and just learning basic skills, we're just gonna just scrape off the top. But this is kind of what I was saying with, see how now it's kind of coming off the sides, so that's why you don't make it completely perfect at first. So I just would say, just to make sure that most of that's even, so you can kind of look down like we did before and just, so it's a little heavier on this side, and then you can always add more frosting. Like I might add a little bit more right here, so you can just add a little bit here so that it's not lopsided. And so again, I'm not going to try and make it terribly smooth, but see how I'm not moving all around the cake. I'm just completely staying in my spot and letting the turntable do the work. So I'm going to put the ganache on top of the cake as a drizzle, and I'm just going to use my spatula and just really control how much I'm putting on it, but not putting it all on top of each other. Just doing kind of this layer, an even layer across the cake. See how it's not really moving? That's kind of why now I'm going to just spread it out and just very carefully over the edge let it fall just a little bit. Just push it right over the edge so that it'll kind of fall right on over the cake. And I'll move some onto this side. So I'm just bringing it to the edge, and then it's doing the rest of the work and just falling off. And so I just want a drizzle look. So if it's like right here when it's not really falling down that much, I'll add a little bit more to the edge, and then there we go. All the way down. So this side's doing pretty well, but still want a little bit more around this side of the edge. So I'll do a little bit more on this side. There we go. So then I'm just going to smooth the top out so that it's flat, so it creates this nice even look. And you can just do whatever type of decoration you want. You can do the drizzle, or you can use your piping bag and use a tip and do a little border, or just leave it how it was and good enough. Alright, so I'm pretty satisfied with how this looks, and it'll even out just a little bit more when it dries, kind of the little wrinkles. But that's pretty much it. So this is the chocolate cake with chocolate ganache in the middle and chocolate frosting, and then a chocolate ganache. So this was completing all of our goals of learning and completing each of these tasks, and then putting it all together to create the cake with your desired flavoring. And so now we'll look at everyone's and cut them and taste them and see the inside of everyone's and how everything turned out. Alright, we have officially learned how to do every step of this process. So we've learned how to make a ganache from scratch, we've learned how to make a chocolate buttercream from scratch, and put it all together into one complete activity of filling the cake and frosting the cake, and then putting the decorated garnish on top of the cake. And so now everything has been completed, and you should know how to make and decorate a cake.